So what does the avoidant experience after the breakup, after they discard you? What goes through their head? Well, first, and this one stings a little bit, they feel relief, immediate relief, a big stress relief, like a weight was lifted off their shoulders. They suddenly have their independence back. There's no longer any expectations on them. They no longer feel pressure to be emotionally available, to be vulnerable, or to give something of themselves to another person. And that sense of hyper independence gets soothed. Keep in mind, as a young child, this is a person that experienced consistent childhood emotional neglect. They were never shown how to process their emotions, so they had to learn how to process and deal with emotions on their own. But what they learn to do is to not deal with their emotions, to suppress them, avoid them. So, immediately after the breakup, they're going to be distracting themselves. They're going to be staying busy, spending time with friends, pouring extra time into work, or perhaps even distracting themselves by immediately jumping into a new relationship. Anything in their power that they can do to keep their mind occupied, to avoid having to face any of the negative emotions, to avoid having to process any of the feelings of the breakup, to avoid having to think of you or miss you, and especially avoid having to take ownership of the fact that they hurt you very, very badly. They don't want to go there, so they're going to continue to avoid and likely pursue dopamine chasing activities. Could be big vacations, going out with friends, or a new relationship. Dopamine is a happy feel-good hormone that goes off in the brain, whether it's early part of a relationship or with fun activities, because that dopamine will help them feel better. And it'll help numb any pain or negative emotions that they don't want to face. So initially, they are just feeling relief. Because keep in mind, being in a relationship is a net source of stress for an avoidant, especially a dismissive avoidant, because there is that pressure on them to give something of themselves, to be available, to be vulnerable. A person that's emotionally available finds a healthy relationship as a source of stress relief, but for the avoidant, it's a source of stress. So they are feeling all sorts of great after the relationship ends. You might be in a world of pain, but they are feeling good and they're distracting themselves. But as time goes by, well, now they suddenly start to feel safe because if you're in no contact, you're not chasing, you're not pursuing, you're not begging, you're not pleading, you're not pressuring them to come back to the relationship. You're not pressuring them to be emotionally available or vulnerable for you. You're not pressuring them to give something of themselves for you or to do anything for you, which means they can unpack and unbury those emotions, those feelings for you that they had suppressed. And this is where they can begin to miss you, or more generally, miss the attention, the connection, and the validation they got from you. They're very unlikely to be really truly reflecting on the breakup and really considering your feelings and experience, but they're likely to be missing you in some capacity, especially from a standpoint of how you made them feel at the peak of the relationship. And this is the point where they can start to breadcrumb or potentially even reach out in a meaningful way. But the most likely scenario here is they'll toss out a few little breadcrumbs, clues, hints that there might be a chance that they might be thinking of you. They're sticking their toe in the water. One, and largely, the number one reason is to get validation, to know that you still want them and that you are still an available option. Now, they might be considering possibly getting back into the relationship at this point, but they're very unlikely to go about it in a direct way. They can sometimes, but testing the water first to see if it's still warm, and then if it's warm, maybe head in that direction, because fear of rejection is a huge fear on their part. Again, this goes back to childhood. They routinely had their feelings dismissed and rejected, so they learned to associate taking any kind of emotional risk with rejection and even abandonment. So fear of rejection is a big one. That's why they're very unlikely to directly just say, hey, I screwed up. Can we give this another chance? in some cases that can happen. It's just not the majority. But there is also the possibility that due to that fear of rejection, they never reach out. They just keep their distance, afraid of reaching out and getting shot down. Another reason they might not reach out is that they have already found a new source of validation. They're in a new relationship that's distracting them, so they never have to process the breakup. They never have to go there, and they never have to reflect on it. But when they do reach out and they do breadcrumb, if you take the bait and you validate them, that can go one of two ways. They can pull back, disappear. They know you're an option, so now there's no pressure on them to rekindle the relationship. Or they can give it another shot. They can try to get back in the relationship with you. But at this point, if they are not taking true accountability, true ownership of the way they hurt you, of their attachment issues, if they're not self-reflecting on why they pull away, if they're not doing things like therapy, committing to a change in behavior, if they're not forcing themselves to do things like communicate when it was previously uncomfortable for them, if they're not doing any of that, then it's very likely that at some point they're going to get triggered again, deactivate, and discard you all over again. Because those same unhealed wounds, those same attachment wounds, those fears, those insecurities, those triggers, they're all still simmering below the surface. And it's inevitable that something in the relationship will trigger them again. Something along the lines of a disagreement, growing emotional intimacy, or any kind of expectations that you have on them. That's why it's so incredibly important to hold boundaries with them if you decide to give this person another chance. And those boundaries can include holding their feet to the fire, that they have to participate and actively work on healing, becoming more secure. You and them both together working to make it a more secure relationship, to work on your attachment styles to become more secure. If they're not doing those steps, and if you're not holding their feet to the fire and not holding boundaries, you're just asking to get your heart broken all over again. And if they never reach out, then what they're telling you is that they are not doing the work, that they are not invested enough into rekindling the relationship and repairing what they broke. And that hurts, but ultimately, you are now free because you are no longer spending time and emotional energy into a person that is not investing it in you. And you'll be free to meet a person that is emotionally available, that is investing into you the way that you are into them. And holding boundaries, whether it's with your avoidant ex or any future partners, is how you get to that person that you're meant to be with. Because your boundaries are your sword and shield. People that are selfish, emotionally unavailable, typically cannot maintain relationships with people that have, hold, and enforce boundaries. That's because your wants, needs, and feelings, and your boundaries and expectations are an obstacle to them. It doesn't work for them because ultimately the selfish partner is approaching the relationship with a what's in it for me attitude. What do I get out of it? How does this person make me feel? A person that is truly emotionally available is going to consider your wants and needs and respect your boundaries, and your boundaries and your expectations are not going to be an obstacle to them. They're going to want to meet those because they care about you and they are investing in you. Don't sell yourself short. You deserve somebody who is willing to give you the same effort that you give them.